Well, I am thankful for the beautiful weather because some of what we're going to talk about today you're going to find a lot easier to do in beautiful weather. We are working on a series about health. Don't worry, there's only 3 parts for those of you who are like, oh no, she's back at it. Here we are. On to the next one. Some of you might be excited about it, but I think it's an important piece. Remember last time we were talking about rest, and so this time we're going to talk about exercise. And you all know that I showed you this last time so we're further along than when we were talking about rest before, that people's New Year's resolutions, many of them are around health goals. And in the top 5 were things like, just to remind us, to eat healthier, to exercise more, to lose weight, to spend more time with family and friends. And we spent some time in that family and friends area of rest, relaxation, etc. And now we're going to spend a little bit of time in this to exercise more, lose weight-ish, we'll put it in there, because this is something that's on people's minds. Hence why I'm bringing this up. Like, I don't think anybody was shocked last time to realize that people are making resolutions about these things. These are the top things, and it's on people's minds. Health is on people's minds. I mean, we were just praying earlier for people who were not in good health, right? Those are like some of probably the most repetitive prayer requests tend to be around health, right? Not that there aren't other things too, but there's a lot of those, and we all know that. So sometimes we think of it that way, and sometimes we might also think of it as something that's kind of like blah and boring. So I want us to try to make it at least somewhat interesting. Let me tell you a little story and see if we can kind of pull this all together. So I got a text a couple weeks ago from a friend of mine who has elementary school age kids who are going to one of our Seventh-day Adventist schools. And it was a group text, one of those ones, and it said, hey, we're going to be doing a walkathon for our school to raise money for a new playground. And I was like, that's a great idea. And of course, if anybody's familiar with walkathons of any sort, what are we normally doing there, right? You can donate per how many laps a kid does. You can donate a set amount. And of course, I'm thinking, these are also elementary school age kids. I'm also thinking, like, how many laps can this child do? What are they going around? Because we're not doing this by mileage because these are little kids. And so I'm like, I don't know, should I be offering that number? I'm not sure what to offer. So I finally just went with, like, I will give your kids a flat fee, because I was like, who knows, like, how fast these kids are. But it brought back a memory of when I was in elementary school, and see if any of you had a similar experience. Everybody here probably went to some elementary school. It was not a walkathon, but has anybody during your time in elementary school ever had like PE, physical fitness challenges, presidential fitness? Okay, see some nodding. Okay, so it was during one of those things when I was in elementary school. Presidential fitness stuff was like a big deal. And what they would do for one of the PE classes is that you would have to be able to do so many of something. It was like my first introduction to like skill sets for like physical activity. And so it's like, okay, you have to be able to run so many laps. You have to be able to do the one that always tripped me up. Guys, and even nowadays, I cannot do the V-sit. And if you all know what I'm talking about, it's just not my thing. And I was so mad when my youngest sister, she made presidential fitness level because she could do the whole thing. I could do everything but the V-set. I just want that on record to say that. Even now, though, I would not be able to do the V-sit. So you're like stretching out. But one of the things that I could do is they would get us all lined up, and y'all imagine a church with those like little like overhang porches you can drive up through. Okay, so we had one of those churches near our elementary school, and they would take us down there. This was the running day because we didn't have a track where we were at track and field or anything like that. And they would send us on loops around the church. If anybody ever did something like this, may not be around the church, but around something. And y'all know the tricks and traits of elementary school kids. Everybody's at the front end where the overhang is, and so you're like, okay, like, on your marks, just set, go. You go running around, get around the corner of the church. Now, if you're a really good kid, you keep running. If you're like, this isn't for me, what do? You're like, I'm just gonna walk. So you're walking around the 3 corners. And what happens once you get to that one where everybody's at again? It's like suddenly like, oh, I've been running the whole time. You come running back through that. Hey, everyone's like, yay, you're doing so great. Run around the corner again. Yeah, that's good enough. You walk around. Now, I have no idea. although I'm pretty sure the adults must have been onto us, because how long it was taking some of us to come back around the church was probably suspect. And some of the older kids were just literally hanging at the back of the building, just like, yo, so what's up? What do you do? As the rest of us are maybe running or walking around them, and I don't know if they ever were like, so how come, has anybody seen Jonathan for like the last 5 minutes who's sitting at the back of the building? I don't know. But I have that particular memory. It wasn't a walkathon of how we were exercising and running around. So I'm curious for you, what were the things that you liked to do in elementary school? I mean, everybody loves PE, I swear. Everybody loves PE. Maybe like as we get a little older, we're like, I hate PE. But in elementary school, recess, maybe that's a better word. Everybody loves recess. What were the things that you loved at recess? Just shout it out. Softball? We played softball. Oh, somebody had room for softball, okay. We played a lot of kickball, first base. Anybody else? Do you think? Volleyball? Wall ball, yes. Foursquare. We had a swing set, we were playing stuff like that. Do you remember how fun that was as a kid? And even if you're like, okay, that wasn't necessarily my experience, do you remember how fun it was to be sent outside and just play? Like you just wanted to play all the time? Do you have a memory of that? Well, somewhere in there, I don't know about you, but somewhere as we get a little older, especially towards our teen years, unless you're like really into sports, a lot of us start to get like, and I'm sorry to say, especially us girls, once we're hitting towards middle school, high school, unless you're really into sports, we tend to, and the stats show this, we tend to completely just drop off the scene in terms of physical activity. Doesn't mean that we're not doing things, but definitely not engaging at least as much as the guys are during that time of year. And there's something about that, and as we get older too, when nobody's like, there's no recess now, nobody sends me to recess at work. I wish they would, like give us free time. There's no PE. Now some of us maybe had very active jobs, but it tends to just kind of go like, you remember the excitement of playing and doing, and as we kind of get older, we're kind of like, right? This is why like in middle school, everyone's like dreaded middle school PE class, right? Like probably if I asked you that instead of recess, you guys would have given me totally different responses. Maybe some of you had good experiences, but a lot of us are like, oh, never again. I don't want to do that. But here's the thing. Our inactivity is causing problems for us as a nation, and as you saw last time we talked about rest, we are going to not spend a lot of time here, but I'm going to tell you some stuff that you probably already know. So like, okay, but with just a little bit more emphasis here. So as a whole, and by the way, this comes from the Center for Disease Control, National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, American Heart Association. This is pulled from their stuff. This is pulled together. 60% of Americans do not get enough exercise. Just off the bat, 60% of us do not get enough exercise. How much exercise do we need to have? In case you didn't know, I put it in there because I had to think. I was like, what's the requirements right now for an average adult with, you don't have particular limits. Sometimes people have limits for different things. 150 minutes of moderate or 75 minutes of vigorous exercise a week. And 2 days per week of strength training. This is also because we live in a world where most of our jobs are sit-down jobs, right? This is probably very different than your and I's grandparents, great-grandparents who are living on a farm working those muscles all day or whatever they're doing. Most of us are not living like that anymore. So hence why there's actual guidelines to how much they want you to get out and move, because most of us are not. And then 23%, this is the people that are even getting the recommended. Now if you're looking at the totals, you're like, where's those 7%? I don't know. But the point is that 23% are actually getting the recommended amount, and that means that 25% of people are just reporting themselves completely inactive, right? So again, if you're looking at numbers like, why these numbers don't add up, we're pulling some data together. But the point is we have a problem as a nation, maybe not individually, maybe you get plenty of exercise, that's great, but many of us don't. The stats show that we just don't. And that we don't tend to find it fun. And we reap the consequences of it. You guys could probably, without me even putting this up here, to just say to me just based off of what you know, because we all kind of know these things, like we kind of know we should be like moving more and doing all this stuff, but we're also kind of like, well, yeah, I don't have time. We have all the excuses. So we know some of the consequences are cardiovascular disease, yep, 34% of adults are considered obese. I know that's a hot topic right now for folks. What does that mean? How does that work out? I'm just giving you a stat. So if you're like, well, just means people aren't getting enough exercise. And it puts us at 25% higher risk for depression if we're not getting enough exercise. And this is also one of the things that in my work, like one of the first line things when you're talking to somebody about dealing with depression is, are they getting movement? Are you moving? Go outside, get some sunshine, move around. And sometimes people are like, that's it. It's not it, but it is very helpful to do that because you're getting endorphins going and you get that dopamine going. And if anybody here has ever been a runner or been running, whether you loved it or hated it, generally hate it. Love walking, don't love running, and that's okay because there are plenty of things you can do to move. You do not have to be a runner. But if you've ever been running, you get that runner's high, right? So walking, moving around, you can still get, the good feelings. You may not get it as big as doing that. And then, of course, you guys have probably heard this because it's all over the news, but here's another number for you. $117 billion in annual healthcare cost related to inactivity. Like that is mind-boggling for me. I'm like, how much related to us just not moving? Just related to us not moving. So, like I said, we're not going to spend a lot of time there. You guys probably already kind of know this type of stuff. So what are the benefits, right? There's plenty of benefits. There's obviously more than what I have here, but lower blood pressure. If you have a family history of high blood pressure, hello, my family. Yes, absolutely. This is very important. It's important for all of us, but you can help manage blood pressure through activity. A 50% reduction in risk of type 2 diabetes. That's huge. That's a big one for our country. A lot of people are dealing with type 2 diabetes. So if you are somebody on the cusp of that or et cetera, just getting some movement, whatever you can, could be helpful. Again, you want to talk to all these things too. If you're gonna, as I say, with the exercise regimen, make sure to talk to your physician if you have limits and things like that, but getting just a little bit of movement. Improved weight management, you'd expect that, right? Reduced risk of chronic disease. That's a lot of what our country and people around us are dealing with. Chronic diseases are everywhere. So getting exercise can help reduce the risk of those, or for those who are dealing with them, can help you deal with them. And then as we saw last time, better sleep quality. If you have ever hiked up Rainbow Falls and went over, which I did a couple years back. Best night of sleep I ever got. I was so tired when we came over and came down that the rest of the day there was nothing that could bother me. You probably could have told me anything and I was like, yeah, doesn't matter. So completely calm and completely exhausted that I think I spent most of my day on the couch and was sore for a week because I hadn't really trained up for it. But when I was asleep, I was asleep. So if you have sleep issues, getting some movement, maybe not doing Rainbow Falls up and over every time, but you all know what I mean. You've all been there where you wore yourself so out of it. So you might be saying, okay, that's great. We know these things. This is a health lecture. Is this a sermon? What is this? Don't worry. We're going to get to the punchline because the Bible does have some stuff to say on this. Otherwise, why would I be bringing this to your attention? Now, some of this goes across lines of what we're talking about for health, but I thought this was a great place to put this. One, you probably would have expected this at any point. But we're going to talk about your body is a temple. Like just setting that up, what does that mean? Your body's a temple, what does that mean? Is that a new age thing? No, don't worry. God's intentional design of the human body. Take a few moments in there. And then also talking about physical stewardship as a form of spiritual discipline. So, taking a look at your body as a temple. Before we read the verses, and they're going to be verses probably most of you have heard at some point or somewhat familiar with. We've all kind of heard that when we go what does that mean? I read a book, and I can't think of the title right now, but I read a book about this pastor who had been preaching for many, many years. He's in one of those bigger mega churches. And he realized that he's I've been doing all this preaching and teaching on spiritual health. And he's but I was not actually taking care of my physical health. He's I was on the verge of having, I think it was type 2 diabetes. I'm going to the doctor and the doctor's telling me this. And he's I realized I'm wow. And he's I took a look at my congregation. This is his words, not mine. He's I took a look out one day as I was preaching on something else altogether. And I looked out and I'm looking at my people and I'm thinking, all the stories that I know about their lives, right? The things that they're asking prayer requests for are chronic issues, for themselves, for family members, etc. And he's like, and I also realize there's probably other people in our congregation that were dealing with weight. And so he actually paused somewhere in the middle of what he was doing, and he confessed to his church. He said, church family, I have not been living the full truth here. I have been teaching you about scripture and stuff like that, and that's great, but he's like, we have been missing a whole nother aspect. He's like, I need to lose some weight. He was telling them his story like I just told you, and yet I've acted as if none of that is important. Like, I have never mentioned anything about our health in that realm, physical health. And so he challenged his church, and that's what this book is about. He challenged the church to get active, find groups getting together, and they were, like I said, they were a big church, so they were able to get into smaller groups and come up with ways that they can encourage each other to eat better, to exercise better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole book talks about these stories one after another of how people made little tiny changes to what they were doing, whether it was getting more active, and they came up with some guidelines of like, okay, generally speaking, unless there's like some other reason, like let's try to get like you should aim for this much exercise or do whatever you can. Just increase fruits and vegetables. They weren't even like, this is exactly what to increase, like try to increase all these things. And the stories were amazing that came out from that. People who were like, oh yeah, I was on track certainly for getting diabetes, or I had diabetes and I don't anymore. I was able to manage that with exercise. People reporting like, I have never felt so good in my life. And also people reporting that connection of, man, the healthier I'm getting, the more I'm realizing things about God and about being able to be there for my family and friends, etc. And just all the connections that are made in there. And so I think that like when I think about this, your body as a temple, it's kind of like what we saw in Sabbath school earlier when that woman was talking about her children, when she said something along the lines of like, yeah, I can love on the neighbor's children, blah, 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 but if I neglect my own children, God doesn't think that's great. He's like, you can't just be like, oh, just over here, I'm going to focus on others. Take care of your own household. And so I look at that when I think about your body's temple. It's like, if I'm not taking care of myself, you guys know this one, we talk about this self-care, but I'm thinking about physical health. If I'm not taking good physical care of myself, I will not be able to help others, right? Whether that's actually being able to lift and move things or be around as long to help others potentially. So it's more than just kind of a saying that we say. It means taking care of ourselves, looking at like what's happening for ourselves and what do we need to make changes on. So let's read a couple of the verses here. 1 Corinthians 6, 19 to 20. Do you not know that your bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your bodies. I mean, it takes it to a whole nother level. Now it's not just about me taking care of me so that I can be there for my family, friends, etc., be able to help my community. Now it's saying, because God wants to live with you and in you, what kind of vessel, what kind of temple do you want to be, right? What we know about the connection between our physical and mental health especially says to us that if our physical health isn't good, our mental health isn't super good either. Again, that doesn't mean people can't have a positive attitude when they're going through really bad things or having poor health issues. It's just meaning we are at our best when both of those things are good. Romans 12:1, also one that's probably familiar. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Again, reminding us that God created us, gave us bodies, and not only when we look at this, like when you go back to the Garden of Eden, God gave them a job to do. And while he maybe doesn't explicitly say, I want you to take care of your bodies because they had perfect bodies at that particular time, he gave them, I want you to take care of the animals, the land, etc. And then when the fall happened, you can see here he's urging them to continue to take care of all these things, and now this has to include our physical health as well, right? Because he says here in Romans 12, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. What do we know about the sacrificial system? What kind of lamb was allowed to actually be sacrificed? There's never one with blemishes. Yeah, without blemish, right? And so this might be a tall order. You might be like, oh, does that mean that God wants me to be like completely like toned and have these gigantic muscles and whatever? well, maybe some of you will, but some of us just aren't built that way, but you all have muscles, you have some kind of muscle. No, it's not saying that, but it is saying that we should be paying attention to and trying to present as best we can for God. Not for, this can go to the extreme, you all know this too, because we are a culture that's also very interested not only in diet culture, but very interested in looks, right? You can absolutely go really far off on the deep end on the other side too, about building the perfect body. Women, we're really guilty of this, and especially if you look around on social media, like what does the perfect body look like? Not just the hair, but like, do you have the right leg or arm or whatever? Y'all know what I'm talking about there. And we see these images over and over again, and I think about our younger folks too, see these images and think, oh, that's the ideal body. Men have it in a different way, I'm sure. But particularly, I feel like it's particularly insidious for women because we're always seeing these unrealistic body expectations. So when I'm talking about that, I'm not talking about that like you've got to be this perfect model, whatever, because we're not all built that way. In case you didn't know, I think most of us know that. Pretty quickly we realize either we have that type, which congratulations if you do, or you don't. It doesn't mean you can't be healthy. It doesn't mean that you can't be strong in your own way. And I think the sooner we can understand that and get the right mindset of why we're getting healthy, not just because we want to look good. I mean, you can look good, that's fine. I'm not doubting that, sure, okay. But that shouldn't be the only reason why we're doing it. And this sets us up for this because God wants to dwell in us and we want to be a healthy place for him to dwell and come into and have the best mindset possible. Now I love this next one because it says God's intentional design of the human body. God created bodies. I mean, that's kind of a duh, but think about this. So Genesis 1:27. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them, right? And we know the story that God got down and shaped Adam from the dust. So he made him a certain way, certain shape, etc. And then, of course, when he went to make Eve, he took that rib out, right? And also made her a certain way. She doesn't look exactly like Adam. She's built a little differently, etc. But God was very intentional about how he made the bodies for the men and the women. But they both have bodies, and they both have to take care of them. And so I think it's so amazing that we can be reminded here that God's not like, okay, this is one gender is better than the other here, one look is better than the other here. He's like, no, I created all these shapes, right? I created all these men and women, all these shapes and sizes and heights and all these things and different muscle types and etc. And he was very intentional about that. If you guys have heard me be excited about this, if you've done any reading on the human body, it's fascinating. Every little piece, if you look at any little piece of the body, you're going to hear a little bit more about gut because we're going to be talking about food. Not too long from now, 2 weeks from now, we're talking about food. And just that alone, like how that affects and what we know now about it, like, wow, God, like that is amazing that you created a system that's so complex that we continually are learning about these different parts. And that's just one part. You fill in the blank, you can have anything else. I mean, a hand, right? Like, hands are amazing. I mean, you could just, any part you could just be absolutely blown away, and we're still finding stuff. We can't say we know everything about that. In fact, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but I had just learned, and maybe someone else has seen this, or this is news to you, and no, it's not actually new news because I heard it late. So you're behind me if you just found this out too. But I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about they found a new organ. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Has anybody heard this yet? I was like, how on earth do you find a new organ after all that we have done with like operating on people and etc. And it's called the interstitium. If you're interested, totally fascinating. Why did they miss this thing? Because it's the stuff around the organs, but they're now saying it's an organ in and of itself. But every time they would try to look at, a particular like organ or whatever, they always just assumed all the stuff they were seeing, like this, they were tissue or whatever. I'm not getting right words because I'm not a doctor. Was just a part of something. Like, oh, this is just like tissue, or this is whatever. But come to find out, it's a whole nother organ, and it sends messages all over the body. But they can only really like look at it in a living body. They're like once we're looking at it outside of that, it shrinks up and it looks dried, and they didn't know what they were looking at. And it's been in plain sight for years. And I was like, that is amazing. I mean, go look it up. If you haven't heard of it, go look it up. I was blown away. I was like, wow. The cool part about that too also, the big C for cancer is they're starting to find that this might be something that if they understand it better, they can actually treat cancer more effectively. I mean, among other things, but that in itself, because they're like, oh, this might explain why certain cells move so fast around the body. It's moving through this system. That's the bad part of it. When it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's doing great. But when it's been hijacked, it's not. So, but God had created such an amazing body that even now we're still finding organs. Like what? Like that blew me away. Psalms 139:14 says, I praise you, for I am wonderfully and fearfully made. Your works are wonderful, and I know that full well. You guys have heard this verse, but I mean, think about that. Like the amazement that I have over this thing called interstitium, like God put so much thought and detail into every piece. And that goes for when we're talking about movement and stuff like that. He's also designed us to move. He's given us legs. And again, I'm recognizing that, some of us have limits. Not everybody. We're not perfect. We're not a perfect society. So movement might look different for people who don't have use of their legs or don't have use of certain parts. But we are generally by design meant to move. And it doesn't mean that you can't get movement other ways too. Anybody's ever seen Paralympics, there are plenty of people that have limitations that are doing amazing things and moving, and they're faster than I am sometimes and missing different body parts. And I have all of mine as far as I know, except for maybe some teeth or something that were pulled a long time ago. But we are meant to move for sure. Now our last piece here, we're looking at physical stewardship is a form of spiritual discipline. You might look at that and be like, okay, what does that mean? So think back to, if anybody remembers, if the fruit of the Spirit is, you run down the list, you sing it in your head or whatever, if you learned it that way. And somewhere towards the bottom of the list is this word that especially us in America don't like very well. Although I feel like I said this multiple times, we here in Southeast have an advantage. It's called self-control. And why do I say that? Because you can't instant order things here. If you try to order something, you know it's not going to arrive, so you've got to exercise a little self-control. I mean, hopefully it will arrive, just as it's not going to arrive instantly. So self-control is a form of the fruit of the spirits here. So let's read here on 1 Corinthians 9:24-27. This is Paul's writing. He says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Now you might initially look at that and be like, well, isn't he using this as a metaphor? Yes. I'm not saying that he isn't using it as a metaphor, but he's using a physical metaphor. He's using things that people understand of like when you're in training, Olympics, you guys know how I like the Olympics. I'm not going to go flying into that, but the Olympians, right? And he's talking about this here. This is like the original Olympians, basically. And he's like, what do? When they go into training, they're exercising those muscles. And if you ever, again, just briefly watch Olympics or hear any of the backstories of those Olympians, they're very intentional of how they're exercising, how they're moving for their sport to get the best whatever out of them, right? To get that one more split second, to get that advantage in the running, to get the extra stroke in the swimming, whatever. They're always looking for that little advantage. And that's what Paul is pulling out here. He's pulling out the ability to focus, be intentional, not only in your spiritual life, but this also applies to our physical life. If you're somebody who's like, oh, I don't want to, I don't like exercising, etc. I get that. It can be hard. Just a brief little story. Y'all know March 2020, what happened there. But right after that, when I was going back to work, so right after the pandemic had been announced in little old Wrangell, and things were shut down for whatever we were at, I quickly realized, I don't know if anybody else had this experience. I thought, I walk my dogs and doing great there. I'd been kind of like, oh, I need to probably do a little bit more, especially strength training, build up on those. I spend a lot of time seated, but I was spending a lot more time seated because everything was phone and telehealth. You would think, well, don't most of the time you sit. Yeah, but a lot of times I can see people, I can get up and down from my chair, go up and get them from the lobby. I was moving. And I was doing very little movement, and it was wearing on me. Like, I would come home and I was like, I cannot sit any further. And it was driving me crazy. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to make it, I'm going to have to be intentional. And so at that point, I intentionally implemented, when I come home, I'm going to do X amount of some kind of exercise, and started building a very intentional routine so that I wasn't feeling the effects so badly of sitting so long. So maybe some of you can relate to that. You might have other challenges. Some of you maybe already get plenty of movement and need to do something a little different in your movement. One other verse, this is 2 Timothy 2:5. Similarly, anyone who competes as an athlete does not receive the victor's crown except by competing according to the rules. You might look at that one again, you'd be like, but it's a metaphor. But what is this trying to tell us? There is intentionality in both physical training and in spiritual growth. There are guidelines, if you will, to our physical being. If you don't move, what do they say? Move it or lose it, right? If we're not moving, we're not exercising those particular parts of the muscles, they don't grow. They don't grow unless we are actually moving and building them, right? And I hate to say this, I know I'm not that old, but also feel kind of old sometimes too. I can feel the difference when I am not doing certain exercises. And I'm like, wow, well, I used to be able to pick that up really easily, even now. And I'm like, okay. So it's very important for those of us, all of us as we age, to be thinking about, what can I do to maintain the muscles, the physical activity, etc. And if you need to rebuild that, take the time to do that. It's the same thing as it says about if you want to grow spiritually too, we talk about spiritual growth as a muscle too. If you're not exercising that muscle spiritually, if you're not spending time with God, it will not grow. All right, so a quote here, and then we're going to get to the takeaways. This is from Ellen White. She says a lot about health, as I'm sure you're familiar. This is just one from Letter 6. It was written in 1885. So over 100 years ago, this lady wrote this about exercise. Exercise is indispensable to the health of every organ. How many? Every organ, including the interstitium that I just discovered. Well, I didn't discover it, but just found out about. If one set of muscles is used to the neglect of others, the living machinery is not being worked intelligently. Right? So in other words, if you're just doing one particular set of movement or whatever and not maintaining the others, if you're not exercising all those muscles, says this isn't going to work. In order to have health, equilibrium of action must be maintained. The mind must harmonize with this. If physical exercise is regarded as drudgery, we're just talking about, some of you may have regarded that as drudgery. If the mind takes no interest in the exercise of the different parts of the body, the benefits will not be realized. The mind must be interested in the exercise of the muscles. Okay, what does that mean? I'm going to take us to thinking further about this. This means that we should be looking for things that we are interested in doing. So if you're not a runner, don't make yourself go out and run. That's not what this is about. I have done that sometimes, like in my past. One of my sisters was a little more into running. You want to run with me? And I was like, well, not really, but I can. And I did, but I wasn't super interested, and I actually ended up injuring something that year, which was not really, really exciting. And I realized I need to actually do things that I actually enjoy. So find the things that you actually enjoy. There's plenty of options out there if you think about it. If you're not a walker, I love walking. You could probably just send me out and be like, just keep walking, and I'd probably be like, absolutely, until I probably got too tired. But maybe you like hiking. Maybe you don't like any of that. Maybe you want to do, I have another sister who's like, I don't want to do any group sports. She's like, I am terrible out there in the middle of the soccer field and paralyzed. She's like, even as a kid, she was like, you guys are all having fun out there, and I was like, I'm gonna die. She has since found, as an adult, she's like, I'd rather go to the local exercise class where they just tell me what to do and I just move individually. Yes, I'm in a group of people, but I'm not responsible for scoring any goals. There's no pressure on me. I just move. That may not be your thing either. There's also plenty of things if you have internet access, which is what I did during COVID. It was like, oh, there's plenty of people out here exercising, plenty of things you can look at. Being mindful of your own limits too, be aware of that as well. Not everything is created equal on the internet when you're looking for things, but there's plenty of things out there. We have plenty of outdoor things this time of year to do. Find a buddy if you need a buddy, and if you don't want a buddy, turn on your internet and exercise by yourself. Just get some movement out there. Take your dog for a walk. So the takeaways here are the following. I mean, one, as we just said, hopefully you see like your physical body matters. God gave us a body, and he wants us to literally be using it to keep ourselves healthy. But ultimately too, right, it's not just so that we can, as we put out at the beginning, we spent a lot of like kind of eye focus for a second. Ultimately we're doing this also so that we can be his hands and feet. When we're healthy, we can be his hands and feet for other people too. As we said, disciplining your body is a spiritual act. And then of course, self-control in physical matters often reflects spiritual maturity, right? If we're able to take the time to exercise, get that movement in, it can say a lot about like what we might be able to do in our spiritual world. And here's the thing too, I don't want to leave it completely at like, oh, you need to da-da-da. Just like with everything else, God is willing and able to help us do those things. So if this is an area where like, I don't know where to start, I don't know what to do, God promises about a variety of things, this includes your health, that he will help. If you're like, I'm not sure what you want me to do, how am I going to do these movements, ask the one who created the body that knows the ins and outs and knows you particularly. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to do this? And ultimately, let's move with him, everybody, and remember that health is a gift.